The newest member of the MyGeoTokens team, Linda Stevens, is joining us as a panelist. Linda is filling a gap that we felt we had as a team. Linda is a geospatial queen. She has an awesome resume of positions that she's held in the geospatial world over time. She would call herself a technologist these days. She's a tech enthusiast. And she is filling this gap that we felt we had that was geospatial expertise. I have a lot of experience myself with maps in a piece of software that I created in my past life called Reflector. It was a municipal asset management platform where you could basically put pins on fire hydrants or draw geofences around pieces of guardrail. These sorts of things that would make it easier and often would feed into Esri, would integrate with Esri in order to make it easier for the municipality to manage these publicly owned and paid for assets. But this is not near as deep as knowledge as Linda has. So I guess we'll start with Linda. Thanks for being here. If you could introduce yourself, give us a little background, your history, how you got to where you are today, and we'll go from there.
Great. Thank you for asking me to be on. I appreciate it. And all paths in the geospatial world tend to lead to Esri, so not surprised. So my background is I started off as a geographer out of UCLA, and I was mainly focused on geography, programming, and communications. When I started at Esri, if you're familiar, it was called ESRI at the time. It was about 100 people. It was back in the 80s. Technology was just emerging. So when I started at Esri, we were on prime computers, and I was prototyping and building solutions on top of the Esri platform, which was called ArcInfo at the time. And then we moved to Mint to Sun computers and desktops, and then finally SaaS. That journey, I was there 30 years, took me from figuring out where this GIS thing was going to be useful, and it started a lot in municipalities and in government, and then where we could extend that reach. And in those days, and even now, GIS tends to be focused on automating maps and reproducing the maps and creating these geocentrics or map for agencies that need to produce maps. Like that's part of their mandate, right? So governments and utilities and folks like that are mandated to make maps. And so that's where you'll see a lot of the geospatial work. I ended up working for the CEO the whole time, basically. It was a small company at the time, created the marketing division. And when I left there in 2014, I was the CMO and running about a 300-person group. And in that group, we targeted 66 industries, marketed probably 100 different products. And I saw transition all the way to SaaS, right? So that whole journey, I've seen a lot with tech. We partnered with all the big companies when they were tiny, right? When Sun was a tiny company or Oracle was just starting out, and all the way to where we are today. So it's been a fun journey.
Amazing. Amazing. What a great career. 30 years. It's not a
Yeah.
common thing these days.
No.
I was 18 at my last job, and everybody says, wow, that's crazy. 30 years. It's good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what was interesting, and real quickly, one of the things in case people have questions is I saw when I started making maps, I learned how to make maps by hand. And because you couldn't make maps by hand and you couldn't collect the data that then you would use to put on top of the map, like aggregate data, you had to do that by hand. There was no spreadsheets, there were no computers. There really wasn't that long ago. And now we take it for granted, but we really don't understand what's behind all of this stuff. And we'll probably talk about that a little bit more. That part's still really important. And just because it's in the computer doesn't mean it's necessarily correct.
Yeah, that's right. We will get to that. So this is a curiosity question. Did you have a love for maps when you were young as a child? Did you like looking at maps, or did your love for maps grow when you got into at what
Well,
age of your life did you start to enjoy maps?
I don't think, and I don't even know if I right now even love maps. I fell in love with geography, and it's such a different concept. Maps are something you had to learn as a geographer because you had to show your results of your work, which was more about looking at everything from a spatial perspective. So things that are closer together have more in common, right? What's above, what's below. I look at any problem from a geospatial perspective. And so when I started with Esri, it was all command line. So you didn't have a map interface. In fact, one of the things you might do is make a map. And so I spent a lot of time building automated mapping around data. So data generated mapping and cartography was brand new. So that was one thing we did. But geography is such a different science than map. They're related, but they're not. And anyway, that's one of the things I'm exploring right now is what's the map going to look like next, right?
Yeah, this is what we're thinking about too, right? Where do we go
Right.
with our map? I see a lot of the evolution of the MyGeoTokens platform being the map itself. I
Yeah.
always say that the first time I opened up the Uber map on my phone, I said, "Oh, that's nice to look at." They did a really good job with that. But yeah, we're hoping to create something similar. But even more important than looking cool, we are trying to create geofencing for NFTs, which is maybe talk about why you're interested in the project, Linda. Like, how do you see these two worlds coming together, and what excites you about working with MyGeoTokens?
It's always been a problem, right? The minute you make a map, it's out of date, right? And even when you make a map now, you don't even know how out of date it is. One layer could be from the 50s, maybe they automated that base map, a map that was made decades ago. And so you can't really verify anything. And I've always thought of location as one of the best verification tools for things, right? As AI progresses, as we start to see things being spoofed, it's if a photo was taken at a certain place, then you know it's not made up. And how do you trace things? How do you manage things from a geospatial perspective? Again, it's not necessarily it's not about this abstraction we call a map. It's about what is going on in a certain place and what do I want to look at in that place and how does it relate to other things. And for me, my geotokens is the ability to actually know and validate that and then share that. So it's huge. Yeah, it's a missing piece for sure.
Yes.
And I did play Pokemon Go when it came out for this very reason. I don't game because if I gamed once when gaming's first become popular and I got so absorbed in it, I'm like, I won't be able to make a living if I keep gaming. So I don't do that. I know where my addictions lie. And so but I did play Pokemon Go because it's such a was such a beautiful thing for us technology geospatial people. Yeah.
Nice. So what we hope that people are doing at each of these locations is pulling down and collecting an NFT. But one of the risks that we're going to encounter, no question, is when there is financial incentive to say that you're somewhere that you're not, people will inevitably try to make this happen. Whether that dropping without actually being there, or snagging without actually being there, and we actually are going to be allowing our Super Geo holders to drop from their couch. They won't actually have to be there. But for everyone else, maybe just tell us what you know about proof of location and location verification. What's current state of that? And is there any exciting news there? This is for everybody that's listening. This is a big reason why I wanted to be working with Linda is to tackle this risk right here. It is interesting. I do want to maybe even work together with a few universities to try to figure out this problem and to potentially produce some IP from this. So this is a side goal of my geotokens, but Linda is very schooled with this. So Linda, just give us an idea of what we're looking at here.
Yeah, so I talked to some of my colleagues that I know that are very deep into this, and basically it's not been solved necessarily, right? The military solved it, everything starts there, and big tech companies are spending time trying to figure this out. But the person I'm working with has a new startup actually that's looking at what they're doing is augmenting mobile devices to improve accuracy and resiliency and to create better, more accurate location readings, right? And that's important for folks that are doing work in the field, but it's going to tie into this. And what they found is that things like Android, you can't spoof raw GNSS measurements. So it's a way they're going in and using that as a way to figure this out. There is people looking at it, but it's not like a simple solution, and it's going to vary by device. And one of the things I want to do is next thing is to hook you up with these folks because it's something that has to get solved, and big players have to solve it. Because one of the things that people don't get is that one of the issues that's going on right now in the world of geospatial is that people have automated maps, again, paper maps, and now they're getting real-time data in the field like LiDAR data and satellite data and GPS data, and it's not matching with the maps that they automated because those maps were made decades ago. So how do they conflate those together, and how do we organize this more accurate data with this less accurate data, but it's the data that represents the model of the network or the model of the city or the model of whatever. Those two things are coming into big conflict right now, and how that gets resolved, right, is going to be one of the big things of this community. So Does that
Yeah,
make
there's
sense?
yeah, it does. There's a really cool, and I love this arena too. I love the idea of crowdsourced data to validate
Yeah,
and update old data. So I love using the people, empower the people to go help this happen. There's a
yeah,
really cool project on Solana called Hive Mapper, and really what they're doing is they're putting video cameras in on people's dashes to go out,
yeah.
like HD video cameras to go out and do exactly that, validate and
So,
update
yeah.
infrastructure and maps and all this stuff. And then they're basically credited some of their own sort of native cryptocurrency, which is it's pretty neat concept.
Yeah, and that was the whole purpose of Pokemon Go, actually, was to collect those accurate, more street views of locations. Every time you're out there catching Pokemons, they were collecting those video views. Everything's about data and always has been. So that's another thing for my geotokens is data is important. Validated data is even more important. That if you know this data is accurate and it's from this place, that's going to even become more valuable as more and more AI kind of starts blurring the line with reality.
Interesting. So we envision most of our users are going to be out there on a phone, likely an Android or an iPhone. Is
Yeah.
is one easier to spoof location than the other?
I think I have to ask and I'll set up a call with these guys, but I think it sounds like Android is easier to get around and it's easier for for us, like the programmers, to figure out the spoof. And that image I sent you is from an Android device, right? So you can a little bit more open to figure out that there's spoofing going on. So yes, I think for developers and Android's a better.
Sometimes good,
Yeah.
sometimes not good. Yeah, it depends on how you look
Yeah,
at it.
exactly. Now, I'm sure Apple is always, I know a lot about what Apple's doing, some I can say about, some I can't. They're going to be doing what they need to do to create the most trusted data and the most valid data, right? It's always about the data from their watches to their phones to everything else. And they're collecting they're collecting data about location all the time. Every time you use your phone and you're in a location, they're collecting everything about what you're doing at that location.
Yeah, this is great. This is an
Big
awesome
data,
data.
come
Use
big.
all the time.
Yeah,
Web3 is an interesting world, right? They don't really like the word big data necessarily. They want to ensure a lot of the time that their information and their data is protected. So it's gonna be a fine line for us. It'll be
yeah,
interesting to
I'm just
see.
I'm just gonna tell you none of your data is protected.
Well,
I've seen maps where I can see all the phones in San Francisco, and I can tell you exactly what your battery charge is, what service you're using, how strong that service is. Same thing with your Ford trucks. They can pull up your Ford truck anytime they want and see what you're doing, how much gas is in there, when's your last service. They just don't know what to do with the data yet.
so long as they're finding that data from other sources and not MyGeoTokens, because we're not. It's going to be our
Right.
goal to sort of do what we can to protect against MyGeoTokens showing anybody's data. But yeah, isn't that scary?
It's very scary because you basically sign that away to them, right? And now some of it we'll be able to, like, so a lot of self-service cell phone towers, right? If we can see a lot of our customers are in this place and the signal's not so good, we can actually literally move the cell phone tower to point to where the customers are because they lose data when your phone moves to another the phone tower that they don't own. So in real time, they're able to do this kind of work, right? It's pretty amazing. And you're like, that's good. That's a good use of that data, right? Because I'm getting a better service. You're not really getting better service. They're getting your service, another vendor, right? So it's all about that. But
For sure.
spatial data is about big data by definition, right?
Yeah,
I,
I suppose.
I didn't mean to go down that path. I thought everybody knew that. Sorry.
No, I think everybody on the call right now understands this is probably the case right now in the world.
Yes, yes.
So, as the new MyGeoTokens geospatial advisor, what do you think are geospatial related risks in your eyes that you think we may encounter and that you might be able to help steer us through a little bit? Anything on the top of your mind?
I think there's a couple things. One is, I think there's a lot of the spoofing part is definitely an issue, right? The other thing is, I think right now it's easy to think of we're gonna have a map, but the underlying map has to be accurate so that the spoof, how do I put this? If the underlying data is not as accurate as the GPS coordinate you're getting, then somebody could be outside even though they're inside. So the underlying data is as important as the GPS data, right? And so that will vary. The other thing is going 3D, as we've talked about. If you want to be able to geofence something like on a floor, that's a lot harder than geofencing an area. And the other thing I think that would be interesting, and I don't know if you guys have thought this through or maybe it doesn't make sense, but a map is just, you're thinking of roads and, I don't know, base map, right? But people might want to layer in different layers of information for different projects, right? And there's geospatial data out there like trails or national parks or soil type. I don't know. Maybe farmers have something they might want to do with this and they want to look at soils. And I just think that there's layers of information that might be interesting to add to the map, which to me is really the underlying coordinate system that you're fencing in that might have some play there. I think there's a lot of things that could happen with the tech
Yeah, a big piece
as a
of what we're hoping
platform.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then Linda, we want you overseeing a lot of this software build. Yeah,
Yeah.
Trevor said noted. Yeah, we're hoping that you can just make sure that we're considering these things as we move along.
Yeah, and I also think, sorry, before I forget, it's hard for people to get their minds around this, right? As you figured out with talking with me. I played around with Bitcoin and blockchain early on when it first was sort of came out because I saw there was a need to be able to trace accountability and authenticity. So my example I always thought of is if I cut down a very expensive tropical piece of wood in a forest that I've been told I'm allowed to. I've gotten a permit to do it. I want to trace the origin of that from that coordinate all the way to where it gets made into furniture. Right now, you can't, right? Because you got middlemen, you have spoofers, you have people. You don't have a way of tracing the authenticity of anything by location all the way to another location. And so I got involved in that, but most people haven't. And trying to explain this to people that could really benefit it, cities, governments, large corporations. You think about all of the folks that could benefit or could use this, and first they got to understand it. And that's wearing my marketing hat. How do we
Yeah,
communicate this?
that's
That
very
because that's
cool. My geotokens is where this could all start. This is where it starts. This is where it's extracted from. This is where that tree was taken. Maybe some use cases.
And so let's say you're South American country and you say, okay, this area, I have a geofence, is where you can legally log, right? And so if something gets in that area, there's a token. You're given a token. You're saying, okay, this is the token for that tree, and that's it. And then it has to be validated, right? That's pretty huge because that's what's not happening right now.
For sure. And yeah, maybe the NFTs are a $150 permit that you need to grab when you're in that location to actually pull something, and then when you're leaving, you have it scanned, show that you have a
Yeah,
permit or something.
exactly. And then when you actually to get through customs, it has to get scanned, right? So we can actually we feel like when we go out and buy something, we're not contributing to problems in other geographic locations. Yeah.
Yeah, the old made in Indonesia, assembled in US and sourced in Africa.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. And for the people doing it, it adds more value to it, right? It's geotoken endorsed or whatever it is, geotoken certified.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
that's a
I,
whole
I
other
like
side.
I like the use case that your friend who's working on this proof of location. I like the original use case that they're working on, and because I can't stand scammers, but really, the problem that they're trying to solve is scammers that are out there, call centers who are saying they're not in a location that they actually are, and they're trying to find these
Yeah.
people. So this is the primary use case behind the tech, and I think it's pretty good in all the region of the world to get it right because these
Yeah.
people need to be eliminated.
Exactly. It's getting to be crazy right now. It's so location. The other thing that the thing I love about also this whole idea of being able to tie something to a location like a photo is that our brains have location cells in them, right? Some of our brain cells are just designed for managing location and understanding and tying memories to locations. And so in a lot of ways, what my geotoken is doing is automating that in a way, right? And location is becoming such a more important type of data than it ever has before. I think we're going to see a lot more of that as time goes on.
I was heavily involved in the video versus lidar debate in my past life. What's a better technology to create a digital twin of the world? Do you have any experience with this and any thoughts on that?
Oh, between LiDAR and video? No, but digital twins, I wrote an article about that years ago because you can't have a digital twin if you don't have a locational aspect to it, in my opinion. And LiDAR, I'm familiar with LiDAR because I work a lot with utilities, electric utilities, and big oil and gas companies, and they're all using LiDAR because it helps them model that, but they don't really know what to do with the data. It's huge. It's another example, right? They go out. This is just PG&E because I'm up here in the Bay Area. I work with them. I sat in a room where they all were just looking at each other going, we don't know how to deal with this data. They'll send crews out. They contract crews to go out to do tree trimming, but they never validate the tree trimming. So I'm like, how much of this tree trimming has happened? And they're like, they actually don't know. And so you have fires like Paradise. And I lived up in Chico for a while, and I don't know if you guys are from around here, but anywhere all those massive fires were that PG&E basically caused because of not tree trimming, right? One of the big reasons. And it's if you could validate that this crew went to this location, right? So what they're doing, sorry, this is a long story. They're flying LiDAR, right, to see how the vegetation is and comparing that to where they had sent crews to, right? It seems like overkill to me, as opposed to just knowing that crew actually went there, right, on this day and did this work. And anyway, we're just going around trying to solve people problem with helicopters. And anyway, sorry, it's absurd. It's absurd. But yeah, they're all using LiDAR, right, for not just distribution, but transmission and pipelines and everything else. And then everybody's scrambling to do with it. The other thing is EO, Earth observation, is a mess right now, right? I don't know if you follow EO much, but they don't know what they're doing. They have all these satellites. Now we have little tiny satellites, and everybody's trying to figure out what the problem is they're solving. So anyway, that's
No
getting off
problem.
topic.
No problem to solve. No, that's interesting. Stay on that. So they got all this equipment up in this thing, right? They're collecting all this data, but we're not really doing anything with it. This is the issue right now.
No, it's a lot of data. So that we have a lot of companies with hardware and data, but no apps. So I've been talking to these guys for years, these investors, because it's first you need to know what you're trying to solve before you just put money into a system. And so you've seen a lot of consolidation, a lot of layoffs, which is horrible because you really have the GIS side of the shop, the vector side and the raster side has always been separate. And I wrote a whole article about why it's separate. It's all just history. But if you could bringing them together could bring real value, right? And so they're all looking for what they're going to do with it. And there is, besides defense, that's where everybody's making their money, right? Intel and defense. Outside of government, who's going to buy these things? And in a lot of cases, you might fly a satellite, but at the end of the day, you still have to fly a plane to get very point specific detailed image of like your farm or whatever, your fields or whatever, your pipeline or your circuits. And so that has not been figured out yet. And again, I just think that's where I think what we're doing here is fascinating because everybody's like collecting data. At the end of the day, you need to know where everything is and everything needs to get coordinated back to a point, and then we'll see what happens. But we're not there yet.
And here's my geotoken.
Yes.
Okay.
And everybody I mentioned, I haven't really talked to many people, but they're like, oh, that's fascinating. And most people in the geospatial space will say, that's way out of my comfort zone, right? NFTs and chain, all that stuff seems, that's all that weird stuff that people are doing. I don't get it. Bitcoin's on the news, so it must be crazy. And so I think educating people about what really the underlying technology is underneath it and how it applies to geospatial, I think you're going to see a ton of use cases that we could sit here for hours and think of them. But I think once we get it into their hands, I think people will be very fascinated and just I think we're going to come up with tons of great uses.
Yeah, I think it's this geospatial, it's this combination of geospatial and Web3 that's going to really allow a whole bunch of new users to be onboarded into the world of Web3. As funny as that sounds, I think I've always pictured sort of MyGeoTokens as almost a little bit of a game, right? It's like a collection game. It's like a Pokemon Go, but for NFTs. But yeah, I think that with some of the technology that we're working into the platform, like the minting on demand, where everybody can collect in the moment, you don't necessarily have to have a wallet connected. I think this is going to be big news for Web3, and we'll onboard a whole bunch of users as a result.
Yes, for sure. And I think, there's just some great nonprofit kind of uses for it, as well as for profit. So I think there's a lot of things that can be helped by it, as well as things that can be made money from. Yeah.
Definitely.
It's always good. That's wearing my marketing hat, right? You got to do both sides of it. Both sides.
I like working with people that have a marketing hat on at all times. Okay, we're a little more than half an hour in. How are we doing here for questions? Let me look at the chat. Any questions here, guys?
Yes, sir. We got one from Steelix.eth. I don't know if you want to come up or you want me to just ask a question for you. If you want to come up, you can raise your hand and join the conversation. Okay, I'll ask it. So back here, he was saying, so this is about the minting on demand. So a little bit outside of the geospatial part, more on like repository and how the file works, and then how does it get minted to the blockchain on Solana. So Steelix.eth asks, what does the actual mint process look like when someone is getting their first MyGeoToken, has never used Solana? What steps are they going to have to take, i.e., are they going to need to own Sol or actually mint or use a credit card? Is there going to be various options?
If you want to mint in the moment, so I'll back up one step here. Let's say you're at a concert, the DJ drops a QR code or something behind, you're in the moment, you scan the QR code, it brings up the MyGeoTokens progressive web app, the map view. It'll show, just like it does if you brought up like a Google Maps or Google Earth, it'll show where you are. And basically you need to be a green dot inside of the red fence of this particular NFT drop. If you're not, the pull down the collect button is X'd out. You just can't do it. And it says you must navigate to within the geofence. So you can, if you're a few steps away, you can get in. But if you are in there, if you're in the audience and if the geofence is set up for the venue, you can pull down and collect. And for us Web3 people, we can do this from within our wallet browsers, we can mint right there. If you're my dad and you don't have a Phantom wallet or anything like that, you can use traditional ways of transacting. And in that moment, what you're doing is you're actually purchasing a file that we validate by putting some metadata inside of one of the pixels of the image, is the process that happens behind the scenes there. So you're able to still buy, and then it goes into a MyGeoTokens wallet. But really, it's a file repository for files that have been purchased but not yet completed the mint process. And then if and when you wish to complete the mint, because we are going to be pulling in the most recent transaction price from secondary markets for each of these things. So you'll be able to see as a normie what these things are worth approximately. And then at some point in time, you may wish to create a wallet, connect a wallet, and actually mint it so that you can go sell it on the secondary market. Steelix, does that do a decent job of answering your question, or are you looking for anything else there? He's requested to speak. Let's bring him up.
Can you hear me?
We gotcha.
Yeah, basically what I understood from that is if you're not a Web3 person or whatever, it's going to feel like they already collected it essentially while it's there sitting there as a file in the repository. Like they're going to feel as if they have it unless they realize, oh, this one's going for $100 and I got it for free. I actually want to go sell it. And then they'd have to download a Web3 like Phantom wallet and log in that way and set it up and sell it and do the whole Web3 thing.
Yep, you got her.
Okay, cool.
Yep, that's exactly it.
That's interesting. I never really seen any project do it where you're basically claiming your ability to mint later. So it's super interesting for sure. Thanks for the answer.
You bet, buddy. Thanks for the question. Yeah, it's an application of minting on demand. It's pretty neat tech. It's come a long way in the last even 8 months for sure. I appreciate your question. Thanks, Steelix.
That was interesting. I think maybe if your dad can make a video doing that would be helpful for people that don't know how to do that.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because even for me, I had Coinbase wallet, which I forgot to tell you about. But now I have my other wallet.
Yeah, Coinbase was having some issues, I think, a couple of days ago. We were having some members of the team that couldn't move stuff around. But hey, we want to talk about issues.
Yeah.
Lots all over the place over the last few days. Yeah, thanks for everybody's patience while we were dealing with those. But I think we're flying now. Things seem to be back up to speed, and we're rocking and rolling. Yeah, we're gonna keep doing what we do and keep building this thing. NFTs are minting. NFTs are minting now, and we did extend the whitelist also. Any other questions? Yeah, for sure.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think Steelix was the only one that had a question.
Good. Okay. I think that's about all the questions I have for Linda. Linda, do you want to leave us with anything? Do you have anything else you want to say, or are you comfortable there?
I do think there's a couple opportunities just in the geospatial community. I think that I run a group on LinkedIn, which is called Geospatial Innovations, and it's really geared towards trying to look at geospatial and mapping, or however you want to put it, from a whole new approach, like Web3 approach, right? Or whatever approach it is. And even like, how do you visualize geography versus how we currently do? And I think that we have an opportunity to transform some of that space with some of this innovation that you guys are working on. So it's exciting times, and I'm happy to be on board. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, check out Linda on LinkedIn and Geospatial Innovations, the group on LinkedIn. This is why I was drawn to Linda. She produces some really awesome content on LinkedIn, really informative stuff. So check her out for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, Linda, thanks so much for being here. Crazy Frog, you got anything you want to add?
A couple things, but Sloth has a question. He says, do you think it'll ever be possible to draw a geofence based on altitude? Base of the mountain versus the peak. Yeah, based on elevation.
Yeah, and oh, I just meant in general. Sorry, I'm answering. But yeah, there's a whole 3D coordinates are two front. You can see them in Geospatial, but also in BIM, which is building information models. They're now two separate kind of industries, but I've been pushing that they need to merge. So there's no reason why you can't build a geofence with X, Y, and Z coordinates, and even X, Y, Z and time, right? There's no reason that you couldn't build a fence that was based also on time. That may be the next thing. Sorry.
4 dimensions? What are you talking about now?
That's
Exactly
wild.
what I'm talking about, right? But you should be able to do that. There's no, in terms of conceptually, right? I get that it's complicated, but
For sure. We're minting in 5D, Sloth says. Going to go watch Interstellar. I'm going to go watch Interstellar.
exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
Well,
fun.
soon you'll be going to want to be able to mint on the moon. So that's a whole nother coordinate system. So we'll figure
That's
that
great. That's great. We do want to allow that. That'll be, yeah, we're hoping to drop something on the moon. One of our weird goals for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, I think we'll wrap up unless there's any more questions coming in. Just take a quick look here. Not a question, but if you want an Eastern Canadian on the team who has an MBA. Okay, Steelix is available. Steelix is available. We'll reach out, Steelix. We'll see what's going on. Okay, I think that's great, Linda. This was amazing. Way more information. You're incredible. You're incredible. We're happy to have you as a member of the team. More information than I think anybody was expecting. And yeah, we're excited to get after it with you.
Yes. Good. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you. Bye.
Adios.